Good morning, the viewers from YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. I welcome you all to the 18th edition of a dialogue with experts. Today we are going to have a discussion on the budget making and budget preparation. We have with us Mr. M.R. Srinivasan, former Revenue Secretary to
Correction, Sivaraman, not Srinivasan.
Oh, sorry. We have with us Dr. M.R. Sivaraman, former Revenue Secretary to Government of India.
Sivaraman.
Yes. We have with us Dr. M.R. Sivaraman, former Revenue Secretary to Government of India and former Executive Director of International Monetary Fund with us. And he has a very rich experience in the budget making of Union government and state government. Madhya Pradesh cadre officer of 1962 batch. He has been the collector even at the young age of 25. He has worked at various positions in various categories. And he was also the executive director of the International Monetary Fund. At that time, he was given a special state of ambassador to United States of America, Indian ambassador to US. And then he has authored many articles on financial matters. He is considered as one of the authorities on budget making. We are going to have two parts of budget making. Shortly, Honorable Finance Minister is going to submit on February 1st the budget, union budget for the government. And we are going to discuss about in three segments. One is how the budget is being prepared even before the parliament, it is presented to the parliament. Next is how it is being processed in the parliament. And third segment is how the past budget is being treated by the Government of India, how it is being handled, how it is being audited in three segments for 30 minutes. Then we are also inviting you to share your questions through YouTube, and he will also give an answer. Totally the duration is around 45 minutes. And now I welcome you all to this social media viewers here. I request Susan Koshi, Editor-in-Chief of PreSense, to take it over. And I will also be putting in the questions. Susan Koshi.
Thank you, Mr. Srinivasan. Mr. Sivaraman, it is our privilege to have you as a special guest on this show, which is the Dialogue with Experts. We thank you.
Thank you very much.
For the benefit of our viewers, the annual financial statement, which is more commonly known as the Union Budget, is the estimate of the income and expenditure of the central government for a definite duration, which is usually 1 year. Mr. Sivaraman, sir, what are the provisions in the Indian Constitution for the Union Budget? Also, another part of the question is that we are familiar with the image of the Honorable Finance Minister walking into the Parliament with a red cloth bag of documents for presentation of the Union Budget. Please give us an overview of how the budget is prepared before it is brought to the Parliament for presentation. Over to you, Mr. Sivaraman.
Thank you very much. There are about 6 articles in the Indian Constitution dealing with the Union Budget. Correspondingly, there are 6 articles for dealing with the state budget. Now, the first article, 112, deals with the presentation of annual financial statement. What is the annual financial statement? It is an analog of the balance sheet prepared by the companies. And as far as the government is concerned, we do not have any accrual accounting system in the government. We go by the cash accounting system. And this has been followed since the day we started preparing budgets in this country. Although there have been several suggestions that Government of India should go in for commercial accounting or double entry bookkeeping accounting. That has been found not feasible as far as the government is concerned. Although there are certain segments of the government where accrual accounting system can be followed, like for instance the railways. And there may be other departments also where you could follow the system as a sideline bookkeeping practice, but not in the main budget. The reason for the cash accounting system is because government will not be able to predict exactly what is going to be its amount of revenue, because the tax systems undergo some changes also during the course of the year. And similarly, on account of the economic changes that may take place, tax system may be elastic, may be inelastic, may probably even get reduced as it happened during the pandemic. Similarly, as far as expenditures are concerned, there are certain committed expenditures of the government. So I will go to the main features of the budget in the sense how it is prepared and all that. First of all, one should know that the government has got certain commitments which it has to fulfill, whether the amount of money is there or not. Now, a person, suppose I am going to prepare my budget on the basis of my salary. I have certain committed expenditure. I have to pay my equated installments. I have to pay the interest on my car loan. I have to pay the rent of my house. I have to pay the fees of my children. And there are certain commitments or insurance for my medical insurance, insurance policy. There are committed expenditure. Only the balance amount that I have got for purposes of any meeting the other expenditure. Food expenditure also almost becomes a committed expenditure because we all enter into contract for supply of milk, water, etc. So therefore, similarly, government has got committed expenditure. For example, the expenditure on the judiciary, the parliament, etc., and the president, they do not get voted in the parliament, but they are committed. Similarly, decretal payments, Supreme Court decrees or High Court decrees or any of the court decrees in the government of India, they are all charged expenditure, they don't get voted. They are committed expenditure. Interest payment of the government on the loans it has borrowed from the public or from some other country or from some other organization. These are committed expenditure which cannot be overlooked, cannot be postponed. By a good government, it cannot be postponed. Defaulting government, of course, default. Similarly, repayment of loans, they are also committed expenditure. Expenditure on the administration of the country, like the police, the armed forces, etc., they are more or less committed. I won't say they are exactly committed because you can always cut the expenditure there, but you cannot cut the expenditure of the judiciary or the president or the parliament, and it is not voted because we do not want that they should not feel dependent on the government for carrying out their operation. That is why we call this expenditure charged on the budget. They are charged. They have the first charge on the budget. So we leave that aside and then only we go to the other areas. Interest payment, again, it is not a charge expenditure, but it becomes compulsory for the government to discharge its obligations. So when you see the Government of India budget, if you look at the amount of interest that the Government of India is bearing on its revenues, it amounts to almost 23 to 25% of the total revenue of the Government of India, because there is so much of borrowing, borrowing which takes place year after year, and also the borrowing which have taken place in the past, for which the Government of India has to pay the interest. That is why, frequently the government is very reluctant to expand its operation, because then they have to enter the market. When the government enters the market in a big way, the interest rate goes up, obviously, because the amount of resource available within the country is limited, and therefore the interest rate goes up. And government does not want to borrow money from the external market for the simple reason that India doesn't have a current account surplus in its external trade transactions. We are always in deficit because we are not an export surplus country. Only when we reach the status of an export surplus country, we can probably go freely and borrow in the external market, because then we have the capacity to pay in terms of dollars. If we do not have the capacity to pay in terms of repay in terms of dollars, then it is going to cause some other crisis like financial crisis or exchange rate crisis like that. It can happen, and it has happened in the case of many countries. So these are many of the broad features that the government will have to take into account before entering into the phase of budget formation. They first of all find, now what happens is, as far as the Government of India or a state government is concerned, around about the beginning of the month of October, they send out information to all the departments, all the ministries, asking for their budget estimates. Now, what are the budget estimates? The estimate first start with the actuals that have been incurred during the ongoing year. Suppose it is 2021, then they will find out the actuals amount of money they have expended under various heads of schemes or heads of account, they call it, and they get those actuals in their front. And then what is going to be the remaining 4 months expenditure for which they have to provide. Some of the departments, like for example, in this current year, like for example, the Ministry of Defense, they have spent a huge sum of money unanticipated because of the developments on the border. They have to make emergency purchases, they have to move troops, on which they have to spend a lot of money, they have to procure equipment for them, clothing for them, food, etc. So that is an expenditure which is never anticipated. So that will be added on to the current year's expenditure of the army. That becomes the first charge in the supplementary budget, because these are all things which have to go into the supplementary budget if they cannot be accommodated in the current. So revised estimates for the Ministry of Defense, for example, may be completely different from what they had presented in the original budget estimate, and that will have to be explained to the parliament that we are going to take an additional amount during the process. So this is the first stage of preparation. Then what is the next year's estimates? What is the next year's estimates going to be? Every ministry has got certain schemes and projects. The normal practice, the healthy practice, the good practice, the practice that leads to good economic governance is the government should divide their projects and schemes into several parts. The parts that can be, for example, there are certain irrigation projects, let's say if it is a state government or it's a government of India project, a road is being laid in the mountainous terrain for purpose of movement of the army. Now that is 70% complete. So the government should first allocate money, 30% of it, to complete it in that particular financial year. They cannot say, I'm taking up another new project, a third project, fourth project, and each project will get limited amount of resources. Therefore, it will not produce any results. Then the capital output ratio of the country goes up very high. So therefore, in my scheme of things, the way in which I used to plan the budget was to divide these projects into different groups. The project which could be completed in the current year, project would be completed in the ensuing year, project will be completed in the third year. So priority wise money used to be allocated. I mean, this practice I also told Manmohan Singh when he was the finance minister, and he also did the same thing, trying to tell the government, the department, that you must allocate maximum amount of money to complete the project in a particular year. So when the estimates of expenditure for the next year is called, so the departments are given detailed instructions by the finance ministry. These are the rules which you have to follow. These are the expenditure which you cannot bring in. These are the new expenditure which you can bring in. So all these details are given to the departmental financial advisors. The letters are sent to the secretaries concerned with copies to the financial advisor. Then the financial advisors, in consultation with the joint secretaries and others, they prepare the budget for the concerned ministry. And the same thing happens in the state government also. Then that budget, normally see, they will adhere to certain route, they may not adhere. The minister will say, no, I want to start this project here, I want to start that project there, I want to give this scheme there. So all these things under the compulsions of the political head of the ministry will get incorporated in the budget or the budget estimates of the department. When it comes to the finance ministry examines all these proposals and they go back to the instructions they issued first. They first look at whether the instructions have been complied with. If they have not been complied with, then they tailor the budget to that extent. Before they do it, they call the concerned financial advisor, the joint secretary concerned in the ministry, or even the secretary at times meets the expenditure secretary, and they sit down and try to iron out the big differences and bring the budget on track of the department. If that cannot be solved, suppose a minister is insisting, I want such a project to be included, then the matter, the secondary expenditure may reject it, but then the matter will go to the finance minister. Then the minister will speak to the finance minister and the matter may get settled there. And at that time also the secretaries will be present and the finance minister's decision will be final on that matter, not the minister's decision. There are occasions when the minister may not be satisfied with the finance minister rejecting his proposal. So he may go to the prime minister. And prime minister may intervene, may not intervene. And such stages are very few and very few occasions these matters. In my 4 or 5 years in Government of India, it never happened when the minister had to go to the prime minister or anything, but the matters get settled there. So when these estimates come, they are all put together, but there are a lot of budget officers who will sit down together and watch all these things, and then they prepare the annual financial statement. Now, as far as the resources are concerned, that is the resources of the government. Mainly, they consist of tax resources and non-tax resources. Non-tax resources are given already by the ministries concerned who are administering those non-tax revenue. Tax resources are administered by the Revenue Secretary and two boards, the Central Board of Direct Taxes and the Central Board of Indirect Taxes and Customs. They administer things, so they do very elaborate exercises, very elaborate econometric exercises, projecting the tax revenue on the basis of past trends, taking into account what has been the various growth factors in the industries which give the maximum return in the form of excise revenue. Now it is of course GST. In the case of GST, they will look at even the services sector. Now, for example, in the current year, the services sector will virtually collapse. So next year, when they prepare the budget of revenue from the services sector, they will have to be very careful to what extent the services sector is going to pick up, because that's 58% of Indian economy depends on the services sector. So they'll have to be very careful in working out. So how do we do it? So we have meetings with all the people concerned, the relevant people concerned. For example, when I was revenue secretary, I used to take meetings of the industry, steel industry, automobile industry, cement industry. Cement industry I may not take, but the joint secretary will take. Like that, many of these industries will look into what are the production targets. Next year, what is going to be a production target? What is going to be the demand? Then on that basis, we will calculate, okay, this is going to be the production demand, this is going to be the consumption demand, this is going to be the production target. So steel sector, which carries X rate of tax, how much will a tax revenue will come in? So similarly, we estimate for each one of the taxes, how each one of the sector, how much the sector is going to give revenue to us. Then we come to the next issue. People may be having problems with the current level of taxes or current rules relating to the payment of taxes or certain procedures involving the payment of taxes. For that also, the Revenue Secretary is normally has a meeting with the industries, with the trade association, FICCI, CII, PhD, Chamber of Commerce, Indian, South Indian Chamber of Commerce, Madras Chamber of Commerce, all of them come for this period from starting from beginning of October till the middle of November, even December. So the Revenue Secretary will have all these meetings and he will prepare the charter of demands, and then he will sit down along with the officers and examine which are the demands which we can meet comfortably, which are the anomalies in the tax system. Sometimes, the tax gets reversed. The input taxes are more and the output taxes are less, which is a very nasty kind of a thing, which the present industry is complaining. Now they are saying the input taxes are more and the output taxes are less. Custom duties of imported raw materials are high, but the custom duties of full commodity which is coming into it is low. So there are certain anomalies. Normally we try to avoid this. Then what happens is certain new things come up, new products come up, new engineering goods come up. So then sometimes these problems crop up. So all these things are entered into various registers. We discuss, take down notes. I mean, people think that we do not bother for the public. No, it's not correct. We will take down notes. I used to take down notes. My joint secretary in charge of research will take down notes. Then we will discuss it. And then each one of them, we will accept it or reject it. Thereafter, we prepare the tax proposal. And the tax proposal is prepared in a detailed manner. Revenue Department does not have any clerical assistance. Revenue Department has got only class 1 officers. We function totally on an officer-oriented system. The first note is always written by a deputy secretary or a director of the Revenue Department who has spent at least 8 to 10 years in the field as a Joint Commissioner of Income Tax or Deputy Commissioner of Customs, Deputy Commissioner of Excise Duty. And when I used to be Revenue Secretary, I always called those people who had expertise in certain fields. Like, for example, there will be a Deputy Secretary who had taken a degree in electronic engineering. He will be dealing with all matters pertaining to electronics. Somebody would be dealt with textile engineering. He will be dealing with textiles. Mechanical engineer deal with other machinery and other things. So like that, we had several officers who were experts in different fields. And then I had the practice. I don't know whether the practice is continuing now. If certain demands are made, for example, in the case of excise or customs, I used to send these experts to the field. I said, go to the field, examine, discuss, sit down with those people, come back, and then we will work it out. So that is how we reformed the tax system during Manmohan Singh's time. We made a lot of changes. Now all these things are compiled, and then we work out then it is the job of the finance secretary, who is a coordinating secretary for the budget. He will sit down and work out what is the final result of all these estimates. The estimates of expenditure, estimates of revenue. Then he will come to the deficit. He will try to find out how much the deficit can be reduced. And so we all sit together. I mean, he doesn't do anything independently. The Secretary of Finance is one of the secretaries. For example, I am the senior most secretary in the Department of Finance Ministry. I become the coordinating secretary. If Secretary Expenditure is the senior most, he becomes the coordinating secretary. Just like that, the coordinating secretary goes by the seniority rule. Then we go into we sit together, we discuss, and then we'll say, okay, if the fiscal deficit is coming to 3.8%, can we reduce it 3.6? Then the Secretary Expenditure goes back and sees what expenditure can be cut. The Secretary Revenue will find out whether he can boost up revenue by some other means. Then the non-tax revenue people will also be gingered up to see whether something more can come from the non-tax side. So like that, we play around for about almost 3 to 4 weeks, depending upon how we can, and then we ultimately will find a particular place in the, for the government to have the fiscal deficit. Without that, we will not be able to manage the affairs of the government. Even that, it is only an exercise in numbers. One cannot say those numbers will be always there. So when once this is almost nearing finalization, that the budget speech is prepared. The budget speech is in 2 parts.
Sir, for that I will come to you. Sir, now you are one of the tax experts. You have done a lot of tax reforms during Dr. Manmohan Singh reforms. Even the PAN card concept itself, it was introduced by you, and Dr. Manmohan Singh was is holding a #1 PAN card, and you are holding a #2 PAN card. And with so much of taxation, whenever the finance minister comes to the parliament, all of us are talking only about the taxation. How much will be the salary tax? How much will be the taxes for this, that? How much it will be the automobile? These are all the things. Now, can we have your views? How the budget gets prepared, and how the when it comes into the parliament, how the finance minister deals with that, or the parliament members deal with the budget?
Now, as far as as soon as we see, the finance minister may be having discussions with the ministers concerning their departments. As I said, if the ministers have got some new schemes or projects which are difficult to be convinced at the secretary's level, then these estimates are finalized by the finance minister level. As far as the tax resources are concerned, it is strictly between the revenue secretary and the finance minister finally. Although some of these details may be discussed in the secretary's committee, that is the finance secretary, secretary expenditure, myself, and chief economic advisor. But finally, when the file goes, it goes only under the signature of the revenue secretary. He becomes wholly and solely responsible for what he writes there, which goes. So this people should understand. It is the responsibility under the transaction of business rule. The secretary becomes responsible for the ministry administratively. The minister is also responsible, but politically is more responsible, less administratively. Administrative responsibility falls squarely on the secretary concerned. So as far as tax matters are concerned, it is the revenue secretary who signs a final file, which goes to the minister for approval. So when all these
when it goes to the cabinet, sir, for approval, when it goes to the cabinet for approval,
budget does not go to the cabinet for approval. The budget ultimately, after it is prepared and the budget speech is finalized, the budget speech is usually discussed with the Prime Minister, because the country's policy document is going to be placed before the Parliament. So in detail, the budget is discussed with the Prime Minister when only the 3 secretaries, chief economic advisor are present. Nobody else is present. The finance minister and the Prime Minister. Nobody, not even the Prime Minister's secretary is present. So when once that is discussion is over, the final budget speech is prepared. The final budget speech, of course, we don't give it to the Prime Minister, because whatever he wants to say, he has said it and we put it in it. And after the speech is finalized and everything is ready, the budget goes for print. Now, the printing in any case will be carried on, irrespective of some of the minor procedures that may be going in. And 1 hour before the budget is, this was the practice in my time. 1 hour, and that was a practice for all those 60, 70 years. 1 hour before the budget is presented, the cabinet meets in the Parliament House. In the Parliament House, the cabinet meets, and the presentation of the budget in a summary form is done to the cabinet. Basically, the major economic policy issues are there. The finance minister or the secretary economic affairs will speak. The entire tax proposal, tax changes, rule changes, etc., will be presented to the cabinet by the revenue secretary. So for 4 years, I used to present it to the cabinet, the changes in the tax system, why those changes were being brought in, why certain changes were not being allowed, certain changes were not being accepted by the public, etc. So what the ministers do is normally they listen, they may make some comments, because they are also, some of them may be very good chartered accountants, lawyers, eminent people and all. So they may make, why did you do this, Sivaraman? Why couldn't you have done this way? Why can't you do this way? So those points which we will take, but we cannot make any change at that particular point of time. Then after the cabinet meeting is over, it is the cabinet supposed to have been cleared the budget. Then the finance minister goes into the parliament and makes the speech. And on that day itself, all the bills are presented, appropriation bills is presented, the finance bill, everything goes. Now that procedure is also somewhat intricate because the finance bill, etc. For example, for presentation of the budget, you have to take the president's approval. For presentation of appropriation bill, you have to take the president's approval. And the demand for grant, everything comes in the appropriation bill. So president approval is taken. Finally, when the finance bill is voted and passed by the parliament, president's approval is taken. So unless the president has given his signature on the thing, you cannot say that the budget is complete, because unless he signs, you present the financial statement, we present the financial statement. He says you present the demand for grants, we present the demand for grants. He approves the finance bill, we go with the finance bill. Now the appropriation bill consists of the various ministries' expenditure proposals and also the receipts. Receipt side in any case are not voted or anything. Expenditure side is prepared in the form of demand for grant. Why is it called demand for grant? Because I, as a minister, I am approaching the concerned the parliament, and I am requesting, please give me the grant. It should not have been demand for grant. It should have been a request for grant. But it has been there for demand for grant. Therefore, you will see in the budget papers demand for grant like that, grant number so and so. But ultimately, it will become grant because the grant is given by the parliament. The parliament has got the authority to allow you to spend that money. So what happens in the parliament when once the huge documents are given and all these papers are given, the parliament divides itself into standing committees and they go into the various estimates, and then they will recommend, all right, because you cannot discuss some of these things will come, some may not come. So part of the discussions will be over. And when it comes to the parliament, the demand for grant is presented by the concerned minister, and there is a short debate. Maybe sometimes it may be 1 day, sometimes it may be only 1 hour, sometimes there will be a guillotine. Guillotine in the sense all the demand for grant are presented in the same day, because some other grants, for example, Ministry of Defense grant may take a long time because the current defense situation is very delicate. So similarly, there may be other areas where the discussions in the demand for grant may be prolonged. Now there are in those demand for grant discussions what is known as cut motions, because some people are not satisfied. Let us say the National Highways Authority, Mr. Gadkari has presented a budget. Some member of parliament may stand up and say, I demand a cut the budget by 1 rupee. What does it mean? He wants to express his displeasure or his complaint with the ministry. It's not that the demand will be cut by 1 rupee, but he will say, now then he will get an opportunity to speak. He will say, my 4-lane road has not been constructed. This is developed pits and these areas have been completely gone. The contractor is not good. He has cheated the government. All these things they can say, and you are supposed to reply to it. The minister will reply to all those things satisfactorily. If he cannot reply, for example, let us take Chennai itself. The Punamali High Road stretches, the national highway has been completely damaged. The High Court has said you will not even collect any tolls on that for the so. So that matter may come up from by the member of parliament representing that area. Look, sir, the High Court has passed. Therefore, the National Highways Authority is not been paying any attention. The contractor is not doing anything, or the may allege bribery, corruption, etc. So these things will come to the notice of all the members. That is where the parliament has the control over the government. Then the minister concerned, Mr. Nitin Gadkari, will have to find out what the hell has happened. Why is it so full of potholes? Every year I hear these potholes are being developed. Why can't you do something? Then they may say, all right, sir, now we'll remove this contractor. We'll have to put a concrete road or something because it's susceptible for erosion, susceptible for pitting, or that area is very heavy traffic goes on, very big trucks fly in that area. Therefore, we have to change the entire pattern. So then Mr. Gadkari will come and say, sorry, sir, this has been happening. Now we are going into the engineering aspect of it. We are going to repair it and find a permanent solution. So these are the kinds of debates which take place in the parliament. But the members are not going to restrict themselves to the demand for grant of a particular department. They may raise any issue because the minister, the members of parliament have got a right to raise any issue. You cannot stop them. They may, during the course of debate, they may say, this accident took place, police did not do this. They may straight away go into a tangent. So these things you cannot stop, but the minister has got the responsibility to answer. Suppose it concerns the complaint to the minister, the member of parliament concerns some other department, then he will request the other minister to reply. But those occasions are not very frequent, but it might happen also. Then the parliament votes the demand for grant by every ministry. I think there are about 100 demand for grant, or I don't know how many are there, because there are so many ministries which have come up now. Some ministry may have 2 demands or 3 demands also. So these demands are voted. Then once they are voted, then the appropriation bill is introduced. The appropriation bill must have already been introduced. There is virtually no appropriation bill discussion, but during the appropriation bill also, some members can raise, I'm going to cut this expenditure, do this thing, but budget then does not get changed at all. Then in the beginning itself, the finance bill would have been moved. Nowadays, the finance bill is a truncated bill. Why is it truncated? Because only the customs and central excise portion, which deals only with petroleum products and other things, and the income tax and corporation tax coming. Because the GST is being completely given over to the GST Council. If GST rates are amended, major changes come in, then central GST law will have to come into the parliament, and that will come along with the finance bill, and or in the finance bill itself they will make a provision. GST rates are being changed in this manner, or GST rules are being changed in this manner. But those things would have already been approved by the GST Council. Similarly, if some changes take place, every state government will have to pass their own GST state specific GST law and make a change. So now, actually, earlier the secrecy of the budget was very important in the sense, because if you make a change in tax rate, people may move stock here, there, etc. They used to make money. But now that cannot happen, because GST rates are being discussed openly and they are not being changed very frequently. And even if they are changed, you see the state ministers come there. So therefore, that secrecy element in the budget is completely lost. So British government is now thinking in terms of giving up the secrecy, and they say, let the budget be open, let the public discuss about it, what is the harm, let there be an open discussion. But I don't know, the parliamentarians will say it is our prerogative, it is our right to know first. Who are you to say that I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that? The public, etc. That is not correct. We are the first people who have to discuss the policy issues. You cannot discuss it in the public. But generally what happens, the government announce policies. Now, take for example the Kisan Yojana with 6,000 rupees being given. It's one of the most important decisions taken by the government of India. 6,000 rupees being given to every farmer. That's a major policy decision. Similarly, government may take policy decisions without even informing the public, or within their own cabinet thing. The ministers take the responsibility to meet the criticism in the public or amongst the members of the parliament. So these are all parts of democracy, or these are the democratic practices that you see happening everywhere. Now, once the demand for grants are voted and the appropriation bill is passed, then the president signs the appropriation bill, which becomes an appropriation act. Similarly, finance bill is voted, finance bill is signed, then it becomes a finance act. You might have remembered Mr. Jaitley introduced all kinds of things in the finance bill, which I think the case is still pending in the Supreme Court. Whether it is a money bill, whether it can be introduced in the finance as a part of the thing. Aadhaar was introduced as some of the provisions of Aadhaar were introduced in the finance bill. So that question is still a pending decision by the Supreme Court. But normally no finance minister will bring in very, very extraneous elements into the finance bill, because that is not a correct thing to do, because the opportunity for discussion is very, very limited. So it is not appropriate. In the 4 or 5 years,
after the budget gets passed and the finance bill gets passed, and what the government, how it deals with the approval?
The government is very simple. See, as soon as the demand for grant is passed, then the ministry takes charge, because the minister's demand for an X amount of rupees has already been granted by the parliament by the Appropriation Act. So thereafter, the financial advisor, whoever is in charge, he or any XYZ, she will do the allocation to the various heads of departments under the ministry. If the ministry is directly responsible for sending, she will communicate to the state government concerned that this is the scheme, centrally sponsored scheme, a central sector scheme, so much budget has been allocated. So whatever your expenditures are, please report. Then it is the responsibility of the financial advisor and the concerned joint secretary. They will approve it and they will release the funds periodically to the concerned. This is what happened.
So,
Now,
if I may interrupt, Mr. Sivaraman, so with this, the budget is approved and it is allocated. So then, before we are due for the next lot, next year's budget, so it is utilized, it is implemented, and there is an element of auditing also that happens. Could you just
I will tell you about
that?
auditing. There is a Controller General of Accounts in the central government. State government, I don't know whether they have it or not. Some state government had financial advisor and others, but generally in the state government it doesn't happen because the central government is very huge. And the financial advice, the accounts, there is a separate controller of accounts for every ministry. The controller of accounts monitors the expenditure that has been approved and incurred through banking scrolls which come to her. Nowadays they don't come to her, it comes by the through the internet. So much money is being spent on every kind of thing, so she keeps track of it. So month-wise she will prepare how much of money has been spent, how much is the balance left in each under scheme. It is for her responsibility to prepare the accounts. Now, before the end of the year, the controller of accounts see how much money has been spent, the entire controller of accounts government of India. Then at the final year closing, before the 28th of April, normally 27th or 28th of April, the C&AG, the accountant general, central accountant general, gives the figures of expenditure for all the ministries against the provisions approved by the parliament. So that is tallied by the Controller General of Accounts. So you have a full-fledged statement of accounts prepared. So then you will know what are the surplus, if you have surpluses in the department budget, or you have incurred more than the sanction. Incurring more money than the sanction is not correct. Because then the minister will have to go for a supplementary grant and he has to go. And that he cannot go immediately. When once, suppose for instance, Ministry of Defence has got 1 lakh of crores expenditure and they spend 1,10,000 crores. They have spent the money. They have to go before the committee and the parliamentary committee. And the parliamentary committee will inquire, why did you spend this money? Why did you not come for supplementary grants? They may even order a inquiry into the matter if something is fishy. But there are certain countries in the world, if you incur expenditure more than the allotted amount, you can go to jail. Because you have taken away money from the treasury without the approval of the parliament. So you can go to jail. The concerned officer who spent the money more than. Now, in an emergency situation that has happened now, you go for a supplementary grant. Or even during that process, suppose some expenditure income is extra, then you can always justify it as a process. It's a matter of a
Sir, the audit report.
Now I'm coming to that. After the account the C&AG conducts audit. Now he does not conduct audit of every department or every scheme. C&AG goes into normally major irregularities notice, major expenditures in, take for example Manrega, take for example Food Corporation of India's expenditure, Government of India subsidy scheme, Government of India Kisan Yojana, this scheme, or some 20 schemes are there where Government of India is giving money. So he will pick up these schemes separately and do performance audit. How well they have been performed, how much money has been incurred, whether they have been incurred appropriately or not. And this report goes to the Public Accounts Committee. Again, C&AG submits to the President. President marks it to the Finance Minister. Finance Minister places it before the Parliament. Then it goes to the Public Accounts Committee. Then the Public Accounts Committee, that is the last but one stage of the budget cycle. First, budget preparation, budget approval, budget passing by the Parliament, incurring of expenditure, preparation of final accounts, and finally the preparation of audit of the expenditure income. Then there is one more stage. That is, if there are certain observations in the Parliament Account Committee, Public Accounts Committee, that certain things have not happened, certain things have happened, certain things have been missing, some irregularities are there, some frauds have been committed, then that report becomes the next stage for taking action by the concerned ministries. Then the ministries will submit their explanation to the action taken committee of the parliament. There is a separate committee of the parliament. Then only when that action taken committee approves these things, then you can say the budget cycle is complete, which may take nearly 2 years, always 2 to 2.5 years. It's a complex process. It's, the process is meant to make it as transparent as possible for the people because it is people's money. And usually the International Monetary Fund looks into the transparency of the budgetary process. And our budget has been considered to be one of the most transparent budgets in the world. For example, the budget of the United States government, nobody will say it is a transparent budget. It is not at all a transparent budget. Although it may go to the Senate and all, they will discuss it. Huge discretionary funds at the disposal of the president with which he can do anything he wants. Whereas in India, it is not possible, excepting certain items of expenditure. Otherwise, all expenditures are subject to audit. Even certain expenditure which are secret service finance, even that is subject to some internal audit by the C&AG. Therefore, our budget is considered to be one of the most transparent budgets in the world.
Thank you, sir. So I would like to have a specific question to you now. In your viewpoint, what should be the main focus of the forthcoming union budget for the financial year 2021-22?
The forthcoming financial year, the budget should focus on the creation of demand. The creation of demand has to be multi-pronged. One is creation of demand for capital goods, another for creation of demand for consumption goods. Now, capital good industry will have to pick up, then only the industrial growth will take place. Therefore, the budget will have to be tailored in such a manner, which is a complicated exercise because GST comes into the picture. Mere the finance minister cannot do anything. She is sitting alone. She can do only certain policy changes which can make, but she cannot do anything with the tax. That has to be with the consent of the state government. For example, tourism industry is down and out, completely gone. The airline business is down in the dumps. Now, repeatedly, they have been crying that you must make petroleum taxes as a part of the GST group. And whereas in Tamil Nadu and all, it is some 50%, 40%, Delhi is charging 30% tax, 80% tax. So they have literally been killed, finished. So now is the time for the state finance minister to get together and say, some of the state governments have already allowed it to at a low level. They must say, all right, this is a very lean period, very difficult period. We'll have to bring the GST level of taxes for the petroleum sector also. They need not bring it into it, but they can say, we will reduce it to that level so that tomorrow you can induct it into it. So these are some of the important issues. Construction industry, for example, is down in the dumps. How to revive the construction industry, whether any tax changes are required there. So automobile industry is already, now, for example, a new car today, do you know how much taxes are being paid on a new car? Does anyone of you have an idea? 45%. 45%. Nowhere in the world automobile is subject to such a tax as in India. So how do you expect the automobile industry to prosper in this country? It cannot prosper. With 45% tax rate, nobody will buy any car here. So this is, and similarly, one has to see what is the tax burden on the country. Now, for example, people are not paying taxes in India. Let us be very, very clear. In my opinion, which I was very firm in holding this view, even when I was Revenue Secretary, there is a minimum of 25 to 30% evasion of taxes in this country. Minimum of 25 to 30% evasion. And unless we are able to master that area and increase the tax revenue and increase the tax revenue to GDP of this country, the progress will become very, very difficult for this country. We cannot always live on borrowed funds. We have to reach a time when the borrowings will have to go down. Otherwise, the interest rate will go up and the interest burden on the exchequer will go up. So the focus of attention of the minister should be such: first, administrative changes in the collection of taxes to ensure that more and more revenue comes in from existing level. Secondly, to look at the sectors which require relief for purpose of reviving the demand very quickly. That is very essential. And thirdly, people are saying that you must transfer money. Now, money is being transferred by the government of India to the farmers, by some state governments also, like Tamil Nadu government has given 2,500 rupees cash. Some state governments earlier give also. Whether it is a worthwhile exercise to transfer cash, I am not too sure, because 5,000 rupees you can transfer, Manrega scheme is already there. In my opinion, we are not at a stage when we can go in for a basic minimum income for the people. We are at a stage when we have to develop employment opportunities for the people. Then another focus of the Prime Minister, the budget has to be what kind of security has to be given to the migrant workers. There is already a law enacted in 1979, which could have given all the protection to the migrant workers. But none of the state governments and the government of India implemented the law. Unfortunately, none of the members of parliament ever raised this issue in the parliament, why the state governments are not implementing the law of 1979 relating to migrants, where all migrants are to be registered, where all facilities have been given to the migrant labor, educational facilities for children, resident facilities. Then this long march to their houses. That is not under the law. The employer has to pay for the once in a year has to pay for the fare to go home. That does not happen. I am feeling very sorry that such brilliant MPs are there in our parliament. Very committed MPs are there. None of them have been fighting for the migrant labor, excepting shouting in the open in the various platforms. They should have raised the issue in the parliament and fixed the responsibility on the Chief Labour Commissioner. What is the Chief Labour Commissioner? What was he doing? The state governments would have had addresses, the number of children, the male, female, every detail that is provided in the 1979 Act. Now that Act is not there, so Finance Minister must ensure that there is an unemployment guarantee. There is some unemployment guarantee scheme. Rajiv Gandhi unemployment guarantee scheme enacted during the time of Rajiv Gandhi. But now she must ensure there is an unemployment guarantee scheme for migrant workers, fully paid for by the person who employs the migrant labor. At least for 6 months, if he is removed from service, 6 months he gets unemployment benefit from the. It will improve, it will raise costs. It will raise costs marginally. I am not sure that it is going to raise the cost phenomenally. No, this kind of a protection. So, as far as the forthcoming budget is concerned, it not only has to focus on how to kick up demand, how to improve demand, how to revitalize the capital goods industry, how to also streamline the tax system in such a manner that we get more and more tax revenue. The income tax people are doing a good job. They are trying to get more and more tax revenue. But I have a personal feeling there's a huge amount of evasion is taking place in the country. Huge amount of evasion. Both GST as well as income tax.
So do you think that the finance minister has got a big challenge now while presenting the budget to this country?
She has got a very big challenge. Huh? I have a big complaint against the finance minister. The complaint is like this. When army commanders meeting takes place sometimes, the former chiefs are called. When there is an emergency, they consult with the former chiefs. In the United States, the experts are called and spoken to. What is the difficulty of the finance minister in calling the past 5, 6, 7 finance revenue secretaries and finance secretaries for a meeting? She is calling all industrialists. She is calling economists. Call those people who prepared the budget, who have been preparing the budget and who are known to have been experts in this area. Please call them. A number of people, Chandrasekhar, former cabinet secretary, was there for 3 years as revenue secretary. I was there for 4 years. There are very good, competent finance secretaries there. Call Monte Carlo, call me, call somebody else, call Geeta Krishnan, people like that who have been there in the finance ministry for 8 years and 10 years. I spent almost 5 plus 5, 10 years in the finance ministry in North Block. 10 years. And 12 years I spent in the government of Madhya Pradesh as special secretary and secretary of finance. Call people like that. Discuss with them what is the harm. If you don't want to pay our airfare, fine. We will pay our own airfare and come there. We don't want even a cup of tea from you. But please talk to us. What is going wrong in the system? But they don't want to talk to us. I don't know the reason. In the United States, police stations call retired precinct chiefs for consultations on murders committed. And in this country, nobody wants to consult anybody. They call the economists. Economists are leftist economists, rightist economists, centrist economists. Some of them know the budget, some of them don't know the budget. They will come and speak something and go away. And nobody bothers. But when the industrialists come, you listen to them carefully because they are coming with some practical wisdom. When people who have prepared the budget at the state level, central government level, they know what has gone in, what has gone wrong in their time, what can go right now, what were the mistakes which they committed, what should be avoided now. Those people can come and tell you. What is the harm in meeting with them for 1 hour? No finance minister ever does it. Not even Manmohan Singh. In my time also. But in my time, in my time, I at least consulted many people privately.
So I think this is a very great thing that one needs to really take up, a very relevant. And you also raised another point about the migrants issue, which came into focus recently during the very grave period last year. So I would like to ask you one more question, maybe to wind up if there's nothing else. What are the items in the budget that should be of relevance or to be noted by the common citizen, the individuals, the people, the armed army, the people on the street? In your opinion.
To supplement that, I have also requested Mr. M.R. Sivaraman to share his views after the budget is presented live on the analysis of the budget. But anyway, this will be a quick intro for that for a couple of minutes so that we can wind it up.
What is your question? Please repeat it.
The question is, what do you think, or what are the items in the budget that should be of relevance or to be noted by the common citizens, that the individual citizens or the armed army?
As far as individual citizens are concerned, one, he looks at his own disposable income in his hand. Now, this is applicable to people who are in the income tax bracket. Those who are not in the income tax bracket, they are more worried about the GST. What is the level of GST on the purchase of a motorbike? Now, practically everyone in India has got a motorbike because every year we spend about 1.5 to 2 crore motorbikes are being sold in the country. Largest number of sales of motorbikes is in India, 18 million motorbikes. So people will look at what is a motorbike. I'm going to buy a motorbike. Now, next thing is what? What is the price at which I'm purchasing the fuel? So that is a very, very important, great importance to him. But that again depends upon the state government because the tax is levied on, center is also levying tax. So these are important issues from the point of view of the common man. Secondly, from the point of view of employment of the common man, how prosperous is going to be my construction industry? Because thousands and thousands of people are employed there. How prosperous is going to be my tourism sector industry? So if you improve tourism in this country, as Tamil Nadu is trying to do now, reviving all the old monuments, all the heritage buildings and all. But unfortunately, when you look at it, we do not have a systematized tourist program where government is not looking in a systematic way, whereas in other countries, there's systematic tourist program. I'll give you a small example. Now, you go to Ooty, there is a place, a high altitude place where you go. And there, when you go there, the government has got a vehicle which takes you in. You cannot enter the forest. I forget the name of the place. It is about 8,000 feet. Now, those buses are ramshackle buses. The drivers are not paid anything. Whereas if you go to Europe, you go to United States, you enter a tourist bus, they tell you, every day you pay $5 to the tourist guide. Every day you pay $2 to the driver as a tip. In our country, they say, oh, bribe yaar. This is corruption. In our country, it becomes corruption. In their country, it is a tip, which is provided for under law. So here also, so these major changes, if you make, the tourism industry will flourish. People will get more employment. Now, for example, you enter let us say you enter Bodh Gaya. In Bodh Gaya, in other countries, suppose it has been other countries, you cannot enter Bodh Gaya without a tourist guide accompanying you. And the tourist guide gets a job. It is not showing in this country. They are left in the lurch. You may employ, you may not employ, which is not correct. So these are some, and there have been Director General of Tourism. My batchmate was also there. Nobody bothers. Udhar gaya, pata, conference, this kind. Birla conference, this kind, London conference, but they never bother about the common man there. So these are governance mistakes in this country. Now you enter Taj Mahal. You enter Taj Mahal, you stand at the gate after buying your ticket. You say you must buy a ticket for a guide also. Without that, you cannot enter. Bhul Bhulaiya in Lucknow we enter. You cannot enter Bhul Bhulaiya without a guide because you will get lost there. Whereas in Taj Mahal and that is not so. So in all these places, the government of India should become very strict. They said no tourist can go without a guide. So the guide gets employment. In Tamil Nadu, for example, Tanjore Bhagadishwar temple, if you have to go, if a tourist bus comes, it has to come with a guide. An entrance ticket should be there. If a common man goes for worship, you can't insist on that. So these are some of the streamlining which has to be done in our, whereas it will generate a huge number of employment. Tourism is a sector where employment opportunities are open, which we are not promoting.
Right. Mr. Srinivasan, if you do not have any more questions, maybe we can wind up.
We can wind it off. And after the presentation of the budget, Mr. Sivaraman has kindly agreed to give his analysis. That again we will be broadcasting live through this channel, and we will announce the date and time later after the budget is presented, because there we will have a lot of things to be learned. Originally, I thought we can have one single part. After listening to Sri Sivaraman, I thought that we should have at least a minimum of 2 parts of budgeting for a better understanding. Because
I would request you, Srinivasan, I would request you to get me for this year they are not distributing any budget documents.
Oh.
No budget document this year.
Sir, it will be virtual, no? It will be available on net.
It will be available on net.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Mr. Srinivasan, shall I conclude?
Yes, please conclude.
Okay. Mr. Sivaraman, thank you very, very much for an enlightening and informative and very interestingly explained session. We are really grateful to you, sir. And it is, as I said before, it has been a privilege to have you as our guest for this session. Now, before concluding, I invite Mr. Srinivasa Gopal, our technical support, to join us on screen. Thank you. Srinivasa Gopal is our technical backbone in ensuring smooth conduct of this.
No, it has been excellent, I must say. That was absolutely faultless.
Thank you. And therefore, this is Susan Koshi joining Prime Point Srinivasan and Srinivasa Gopal in thanking Mr. Sivaraman once again before signing off.
Thank you all. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much, sir.